Have you ever stood in the very moment that you prayed for and wondered why you still feel the same? You reached the goal, you hit the number, you got the promotion, you built the business, you achieved the very thing that you thought would change everything. And for a moment, it did. There was excitement, there was relief, validation, celebration, even pride. You told yourself, this is what I've been working for. This is the moment everything changes. But then life settled back down. The celebration ended as it does. Messages stopped coming in, the congratulations faded into the background. And when the noise disappeared, something unexpected happened. You found yourself face to face with the same person that you were before. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Aaron, and I help you change the way you see yourself so that you can stop surviving life emotionally and actually start living it. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button. You're in the right place. Have you ever been there post-achievement where you're face to face with the same person you were before? Same doubt, same fear, same habits, same insecurity, same stories. And maybe you started asking yourself questions that you never thought you would ask. Questions like, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? Most people never say that question out loud. You see, it sounds ungrateful because you got what you wanted and you should be happy. You should be fulfilled. You should feel different. But if you've ever experienced that feeling, I want to let you know that it's not because you're ungrateful, but it might mean that you've discovered the very thing that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. The simple notion that external success cannot create internal transformation. Because we've been taught to believe that the next achievement will actually make us feel the way that we've been longing to feel. Confident, secure, worthy, successful, at peace. And with that, we spend years chasing milestones, not because we want the thing itself, but because of who we think that thing will allow us to become. Think about it. Very few people want money because they love how numbers look in their bank account. What they really want is what they believe that money represents: freedom, security, options. Can I get a witness? Very few people want recognition because they crave attention. They want what they think recognition will give them: validation, significance, worth. Very few people want success for success's sake. They want what they believe success will finally let them feel. And this is where most people get stuck because they unknowingly place their identity on the other side of the outcome. When I have the business, I'll become confident. When I have the time, I'll become healthy. When I have the relationship, I'll feel worthy. When I have success, I'll finally believe in myself. And so what many believe is once they have, they will do, and then they will be. And it's a sequence that we've been taught our entire lives. And because everyone around us believes it too, we rarely stop to even question it. But what if that formula is the exact reason that you feel so exhausted? What if the problem isn't your work ethic, your goals? What if the problem is the way you're working the formula? Because no achievement can permanently change the story that you're telling yourself. No promotion can heal the identity that is built on inadequacy. And no relationship can give you an identity that you refuse to build yourself. External results amplify who we are. They can't define who we are. And eventually, every single one of us run into the same reality. After the applause fades, after the excitement wears off, and after the goal is achieved, you still have to wake up and live with the person in the mirror, which raises a difficult question. What if the thing you're chasing isn't actually what you want? What if what you really want is who you believe you'll become when you get it? Because if that's true, then we've been chasing life backwards. And if that's true, maybe the life you want isn't created by what you have. Maybe it's created by who you become. Maybe success doesn't create identity. Maybe identity creates success. And if that's true, everything in our lives is subject to change. Let me introduce you to David. You probably know a David, or hey, you may even be a David, so welcome, David. But David was the kind of person everyone admired. He worked hard, showed up early, stayed late, set goals, checked boxes, did everything successful people are supposed to do. And it worked, at least from the outside. His career grew, his income increased. People respected him. In fact, he became the person that people would point at and say, look at everything that he's accomplished. But there was something that nobody saw. David lived with a quiet belief that shaped almost every decision that he made. He believed that one day, success will actually make him feel successful. The promotion will equal confidence. The money will stop the worry. The business will add security. And David thought, hey, once others recognize my value, I'll recognize it too. And maybe your version sounds a little different. Once I lose weight, I'll love my body. Once I find the relationship, I'll feel worthy. Once the kids are older, I'll prioritize myself. Once life starts slowing down, I'll start living. Different words, yes, but same belief. We're constantly placing our identity on the other side of an outcome. We're waiting for results to give us permission to become who we want to be. And the cost of that is enormous, because while you're waiting to become confident, life keeps moving. While you're waiting to be disciplined, opportunities keep passing. And herein lies the tragedy. Not that you fail, not that you fall short, but that you postpone yourself. You postpone your joy. You postpone your peace. You postpone your happiness because you believe becoming comes after having. David didn't realize he was doing this. In fact, he thought he was being responsible, driven, and ambitious. He believed that the next milestone would quietly quiet the voice that keeps whispering, "You're not enough." So he kept chasing, and every achievement gave him exactly what he expected. For a little while, a few weeks of confidence, a few weeks of clarity, a brief moment of relief, and then it all disappeared. The voice came back knocking, "Hey dog, you still not enough." Because no external result can permanently solve an internal identity problem. Achievements reveal identity, but they don't replace it. Eventually, David got everything he was working toward. Promotion, income, new title. And for a moment, he felt exactly like he thought he would. Successful. But then one Tuesday morning, he was sitting in his office and he began to realize something that unsettled him. He had changed his circumstances, but he hadn't changed himself. He was still waiting for someone else to tell him that he was enough. He was still outsourcing his confidence to outcomes, still asking achievements, "Hey, come do this job that you were never designed to do." And that's when he realized he hadn't been chasing success. He'd been chasing permission to rest, permission to feel worthy, permission to trust himself, permission to become who he wanted to be. And that's when the question hit him. How much of my life have I postponed waiting for results to give me something that I could choose today? And let's not just pick on David. What about us? What about you? What confidence are you postponing? What joy are you delaying? What version of yourself have you placed on hold until life changes? And how much longer are you willing to wait? Because one day you're going to realize something that most people learn too late. Life isn't lived when you arrive. Life is lived while you become. And the person you're waiting for success to turn you into is the very person you need to become before success arrives. But if that's true, it raises another question. If who you are determines what you do, and what you do determines what you have, why is it so difficult to change who we are? The reason is because identity is powerful. And whether you realize it or not, it is shaping every single decision you make. If you've ever set a goal with the intention of following through, only to settle back into your old patterns, you're not alone. I've done it, and every single person watching this video with you has done it. Many think change is a matter of information. But if information changed people, everybody would be skinny, rich, and happy. But it's very common to think, well, if I knew more, I would do better. If I had the right plan, I'd be consistent. If I found the perfect strategy, everything would change. But think about it. How many times have we known exactly what to do only to not do it? You know you should exercise. You know you should save money. You know you should have the difficult conversation. You know you should start the business. You know you should put the cell phone down and be present. You know the problem isn't information. The problem is identity. And catch this gem. You will never act consistently in a way that contradicts who you believe that you are. Come on, YouTube. Your life doesn't rise to the level of your intention. It settles at the level of your identity. That's why two people can hear the same thing and have a different response. The difference isn't usually talent. It isn't intelligence. It isn't potential. It's identity. Because identity answers the question that you're constantly asking whether you realize it or not. What does someone like me do? Someone who sees themselves as healthy doesn't wake up every morning and debate whether or not they should take care of their body. Someone who sees themselves as a leader doesn't wake up in the morning and wait for permission to lead. Someone who sees themselves as a learner doesn't wait for motivation to grow. Why? Because their identity has already made the decision. You don't have to think so hard. It's what identity does. It automates our behaviors. It turns choices into instincts, disciplines into alignment. But here's the challenge. Most of us didn't consciously choose which identity we were going to walk out. Not at first. At first, we inherited it. We absorbed it. We built it one experience at a time, maybe a criticism from your parents, a failure that you've never recovered from, a comparison that made you feel small, or a rejection that you took personally. And slowly but surely, experiences form conclusions. You stop saying that you failed and you replace it with you're a failure. You stop struggling with discipline and you replace it with, well, I guess I'm just not disciplined. You stop saying that you made a mistake and you replace it with the notion that you're just not good enough. One describes an event while the other defines a person. And definitions shape decisions because your mind works hard to stay consistent with what it believes is true. It fights for that. And so what that means is if you believe that you're inconsistent, you'll unconsciously create evidence to support that belief. If you believe success is for other people, you'll shrink from opportunities. If you believe you're not capable, you'll avoid challenges that would prove otherwise. Not because you want to fail, but because your identity always seeks confirmation. That's why willpower eventually runs out. That's why motivation fades and excitement disappears, and all you're left with is identity. And you can temporarily outperform your identity. You can. You can force change for a season. Hey, I did 21 days of this habit. You can push yourself for a little while, but eventually you will drift back towards what feels familiar, normal, feels true. That's why people lose weight and gain it back, make more money and lose it, start strong and then stop halfway. The goal changed, but the identity didn't. And identity always wins. It's undefeated. David learned this the hard way. After years of chasing achievement, he learned that he had built an identity around proving himself. Every accomplishment gave him temporary relief, but no accomplishment ever gave him peace. Because peace was never a result problem, it was an identity problem. He wasn't trying to become successful, he was trying to become enough. And no amount of success can answer a question that only identity can answer. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've been trying to solve an internal problem with external solutions, trying to earn confidence, trying to achieve self-worth, trying to accomplish your way into believing in yourself. But what if the thing you're chasing isn't actually what you need? What if the real work isn't doing more? What if the real work is becoming someone new? Because if identity can be built, it can be rebuilt. It can be unlearned. And if your identity has been shaping your life up to this point, then changing your life doesn't begin with what you do. It begins with who you decide to become. Because becoming someone new means acting differently before it feels natural, before you believe it, before you have proof. And that's the moment where most people turn back. This is where most people quit. Not because they lack potential, but because they don't want the change bad enough. They quit because they misunderstand what transformation feels like. Maybe you watching are expecting becoming to feel inspiring, exciting, empowering. And I hate to break it to you, expanders, but often becoming feels awkward, uncomfortable, uncertain. Because the truth is, every new identity feels unnatural before it feels familiar. Think about learning to drive. The first time you sat behind the wheel, you had to think about everything. You got your hands at 10 and 2, gripping it with all your might. You're thinking about the mirrors, the pedal, the speed, thinking about your hands and where your eyes should be going. It felt clunky, clumsy, overwhelming, and maybe even for some terrifying. But now, you drive without thinking. And the rest of us wish you would. We wish you would go back to some of that concern you had when you were learning to drive. But you do it without thinking because now what once required effort has become automatic. And it's not because you changed overnight, but because repetition became familiarity, and familiarity became identity. The same thing happens in every area of our lives. The first time you speak up for yourself, you're going to feel uncomfortable. The first time you set a hard line, a boundary, you're going to feel selfish. The first time you wake up early to work on your dream, it's going to feel unnatural. The first time you choose discipline over comfort, it's going to feel like you're pretending. And that's exactly where many get stuck. Because there's an assumption that discomfort, this feeling must mean that I'm doing something wrong. But be easy. Discomfort doesn't always mean you're failing. Sometimes it means you're growing. Sometimes it means you're leaving behind the version of yourself that no longer serves you. Think about David. For years, his identity was built around achievement. His values came from outcomes. His confidence came from recognition. And his peace came from progress, or at least he thought it did. So when he decided to stop chasing validation and start building identity, he expected it to feel freeing. Instead, it felt terrifying because for the first time in his life, he wasn't asking, what do I need to accomplish to feel enough? He was asking, who do I want to be regardless of the outcome? And he didn't have the answer, at least not right away. Because when you've spent years building your identity around what you do, it's hard to know who you are without it. Maybe you know that feeling. I know I experienced that person. Maybe you tied your worth to productivity, your role, your title, your achievements, your ability to help everyone else. And when those things slow down, you don't just feel lost, you feel invisible. All because you confuse what you do with who you are. And becoming requires a separation of the two. It requires realizing that worth isn't something that I earn. It's something I express. But the challenge is your old identity won't die quiet. In fact, it'll fight to survive. It's going to whisper things to you like, this isn't who you are. Who do you think you are? Who are you trying to become? Why are you pretending? You've tried this before. People like you, they don't change. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake those thoughts for truth. But they're not truth, they're resistance. Because every identity you've ever had wants to protect itself. Even the identities that hurt you. Even the identities that keep you small. Because familiar feels safe, even when familiar is painful. That's why so many stay stuck in patterns that they truly hate. Not because they enjoy them, but because those patterns feel like home. And leaving home, even an unhealthy one, feels risky. That's why transformation requires courage, not the absence of fear. The willingness to move forward even when fear tries to be present, rear its ugly head. The willingness to act different before it feels natural. The willingness to believe something new about yourself before you have the evidence. And here's what most people get wrong. Confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence comes from evidence. And evidence comes from action. That sucker's flipped on his head. And you don't become confident and then do the hard thing. You do the hard thing and then become confident. You don't become disciplined and then keep promises to yourself. You keep promises to yourself and then you become disciplined. You don't become courageous and then take the risk. You take the risk and become courageous. That's the order, y'all. Be, do, have. Not because it sounds good, it sounds catchy, but because that's how transformation works. So if you feel uncomfortable right now, good. That means you're stretching beyond what your old identity believed is possible. That means you're standing in the space between who you've been and who you're becoming. And yes, that space feels uncertain, but it's also where every meaningful transformation begins. So the question isn't, how do I make this feel easier? It's, am I willing to become uncomfortable long enough to become something new? Because on the other side of discomfort isn't just a different life. It's a different you. And that's what makes the next step so important. Because if confidence comes from evidence, then the real question is, how do you build evidence for an identity that you don't fully believe yet? So how do you become someone that you don't fully believe that you are yet? The answer is simpler than you might expect. You stop trying to prove yourself to the world and start proving something to yourself, one decision at a time. Because identity isn't created in a single breakthrough moment. It's built through accumulated evidence. Think about a courtroom for a moment. Every action you take is evidence. Every promise you keep is evidence. Every excuse you reject, it's evidence. Every difficult conversation you have is evidence. Every moment you choose growth over comfort, it's evidence. And your mind is constantly collecting it and is building a case based on evidence for who you believe you are. The problem is, many spend years gathering evidence for the wrong identity. You wasting all this time gathering evidence that says you never follow through. You always quit. You're undisciplined. You're bad with money. And you've gathered so much of that evidence that now, when it's presented in the court of identity, the verdict is that it's true. Not because they are actually true, but because you've practiced them. You've rehearsed them. You've collected evidence for them. David realized this when he looked back over his life. He had spent years building a case against himself. Every miscommitment became Exhibit A. Every setback became Exhibit B. Every failure was submitted as evidence. And he wasn't saying that he failed at this. He was saying that he was a failure. And he would take the evidence and say, well, this is who I am. And that belief shaped everything. Until one day, he decided to stop trying to overhaul his life. Instead, he focused on something smaller. What would the person I'm becoming do next? Not for the rest of the year, not for the next month, just next. Because every identity isn't built in the future. It's built in moments. The next choice, the next response, the next action. Don't get trapped into believing that transformation in an area requires massive change, a perfect routine, a all or nothing commitment, a complete reinvention overnight. Identity grows through repetition. A person who becomes a reader doesn't start by reading 50 books. A person who becomes healthier doesn't need a perfect diet. A person that wants to become confident doesn't wait until fear disappears. They speak up once, realizing that action is evidence. And eventually that evidence becomes undeniable. Not because you changed overnight, but because you changed repeatedly. That's where David's life began to shift. Not when he got another promotion, not when he hit another milestone, but when he stopped measuring his success by outcomes and started measuring it by alignment. Did I show up as the person I want to become today? Did I honor my standards? Did I keep promises to myself? Did my actions confirm my desired identity? Some days the answer was yes, other days the answer was no. But instead of making failure mean something about who he was, he learned to see it differently. Failure wasn't an identity, it was feedback. A misaction wasn't proof that he couldn't change. It was an opportunity to recommit, because becoming isn't about perfection. Becoming is about consistency. And consistency isn't doing it perfectly every day. It's refusing to abandon who you're becoming when you have a bad day. That's the difference. Many break one promise to themselves and then decide that they failed. But people building a new identity break a promise to themselves and have the courage to begin again because they understand something important. You don't become new by never making mistakes, never having a slip up. You become new by not allowing the mistakes and the slip ups to define you. And eventually something remarkable happens. The thing that once felt forced starts to feel familiar. The actions that once required you to muster up so much discipline now start to feel natural. The habit that was difficult becomes automatic because your identity is changing. You no longer work out because you're trying to get healthy. You're working out because you're a healthy person, and that's just what we do. You're no longer reading because you're trying to become successful. You read because you're someone that's committed to growth, and that's just what we do. You no longer keep promises to yourself because you're chasing confidence, but you keep promises to yourself because you're someone who can be trusted. And that's the moment everything changes. That's when discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like self-expression. Because who you are is no longer something that you're chasing, it's who you're becoming. One decision, one promise, and one piece of evidence at a time. And whenever your identity changes, your standards change. Let's come back to David for the last time. Not because his story is unique, but because his story is like ours. For years, David believed that success would answer the questions that he was afraid to ask himself. Am I enough? Do I matter? Am I valuable? And in that, he did what so many of us do. He chased outcomes hoping they would heal identity wounds. For a while, it worked. Every achievement gave him a sense of temporary relief. Every milestone created a momentary feeling of worth. But relief isn't the same as peace. And eventually he realized something had to change. Not his goals, not his ambition, his order. And so he stopped asking, what do I need to have? And started asking, who do I need to become? And at first, nothing changed externally. Still woke up at the same time, still had his long commute to work, still faced the same responsibilities, and still dealt with the same challenges. But internally, everything changed. He stopped letting temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. He began measuring success differently, not by outcomes, but by alignment. Did I act like the person I'm becoming today? Did I honor my standards? Did I tell myself the truth? Did I choose growth over comfort today? And some days he got it right, and of course, some days he didn't. But he stopped using bad days as evidence that he couldn't change. He knew better now. He understood something that he had never understood before. Identity isn't built by perfection. It's built by repetition. And over time, those small decisions created something that he had been chasing for years. Not confidence based on circumstances, not motivation based on momentum, but self-trust. And from that place, his life began to change. Not because he was chasing results harder, but because his results finally caught up with who he had become. And I want you to remember that success that creates your identity can always be taken from you. But success that flows from your identity stays with you, regardless of what life throws at you. So let me ask you, who are you becoming? Not who do you want to be someday? Who are you becoming right now? Because every decision you make is shaping an identity. You're becoming someone because your future isn't created by your goals. It's created by the person your habits are training you to become. So here's what I want you to remember. You can chase results for the rest of your life, or you can become the kind of person that results naturally follow. You can continue living by the old formula, have, do, be, or you can choose the divinely orchestrated order. Become the person, do what that person does, and trust that the results are on the way. Always remember that growth is a journey. It's not a destination. I'm in it with you, and I'll see you on the next one.